In one of the oldest churches in Munich, there is a footprint pressed into the stone floor. And every single day, people line up to stand in it. One by one, they place their own foot inside the mark, and they look up into the vast church rising above them, because the story says this is the exact spot where the devil himself once stood. It is not an ordinary footprint. It has the shape of a human shoe, but a sharp point curls out from the heel. Some call it a spur. Some call it the beginning of a tail. The centre is worn dark, almost black, and it sits alone in the pale floor just inside the doors, beneath the shadow of the great organ. The Germans have a name for it, the Teufelsschritt, the devil's footstep. And there is a reason a mark like this ends up in a house of God. Because there is a point at which a building becomes so vast, so perfect, and so impossibly quick to rise that people stop believing human hands could have made it at all. And once they stop believing in the hands, they start searching for someone else to credit. Sometimes they look up to heaven, and sometimes, as they did here 5 centuries ago, they look down. This is a story about a bargain, a trick hidden in the stone itself, and a master builder who is said to have beaten the devil at his own game. But the truth behind that dark little footprint turns out to be far stranger than the legend that grew up over it. The tale goes like this. Centuries ago, the master builder of this church needed help. The building he had been asked to raise was too vast, too expensive, too impossible. And so the devil came to him with an offer. He would give the builder what he needed, money or labour, or something darker, depending on who tells it, on one condition. The finished church could not contain a single visible window. A windowless church would be dark and joyless and useless to God. That was the price, a monument to darkness, and the builder agreed. When the church was finished, the devil came to inspect his prize. He stepped through the great doors, stood just inside, and looked down the enormous nave toward the altar. And he saw exactly what he had asked for. A vast church, flooded with light, and yet from where he stood not one window anywhere. He had won. Delighted, he laughed, and stamped his foot down onto the stone in triumph, leaving the black mark behind. And then he took one step forward, and the windows appeared, all along both sides of the nave, enormous windows that had been perfectly hidden behind the pillars, swung suddenly into view. The church was full of them. It always had been. The builder had simply arranged everything so that from one exact spot, the spot the devil was standing on, every window vanished behind a column. He had kept the letter of the bargain and broken its meaning completely. The devil understood, too late, that he had been tricked, and in his fury he turned himself into a great storm and threw himself against the church, trying to tear it down. But the walls held, the towers held, and so, the legend says, he never truly left. He is still out there, circling the church as the wind, which is why, to this day, a strange gust seems to gather around the towers of the Frauenkirche, no matter how still the rest of the city. That is the most famous version. But it is not the only one, and that is the first clue that we're dealing with folklore, not history. Because in some tellings the devil demands a windowless church. In others, he simply bets that none can be seen. In some, he pays for the whole building. In others, he tries to destroy it. In one, he stamps the floor because he thinks he has won. In another, he stamps because he has just discovered he has lost. These versions flatly contradict each other, and that contradiction is not a problem to be solved. It is the fingerprint of a legend, a story with no fixed original, reshaped by every generation that told it, each one sharpening the trick and making the devil's defeat a little more satisfying. A true event has one shape, A legend has as many shapes as it has storytellers. So set the devil aside and look at the thing the legend grew on, because the church is real, and it is genuinely astonishing. It is the Frauenkirche, the cathedral of Our Dear Lady, the defining shape of Munich's skyline, two great brick towers crowned with rounded copper domes. Construction began in 1468. And what the people of Munich set out to build was almost insane for the town they lived in. 15th century Munich was not a mighty capital. It was a modest place. Many of its people lived in simple wooden houses. And into the middle of this town, they decided to raise a brick cathedral over 100 meters long and nearly 40 high, a single vast hall of stone, held up by octagonal pillars so tall they looked slender from the floor, large enough to hold 10,000 worshippers, in a town whose entire population was only around 9,000. They were building a church that could fit more people than lived in the city around it, and they built it fast. The main body of that enormous church went up in about 20 years. The master in charge died in 1488, with the towers already near their full height, and that speed is the seed of the whole legend, because to the people who came after, looking up at this impossible mountain of brick that had risen over their small town in a single lifetime, one question hung in the air. How could ordinary men have built this? And folklore reached for its favourite answer. Perhaps they hadn't done it alone. Perhaps the builder had help, and perhaps that help had not come from heaven. But here is the first thing the legend gets wrong. The master builder was not a mysterious stranger who summoned the devil. He was a real, documented, respected professional named Jörg von Holzbach. We know where he worked before Munich. We know he was trusted with the town hall and the ducal residence, and called to other cities as an expert. His gravestone is inside the church, and he is buried beneath it. He was not a man who needed Satan. He was simply very, very good at his job. And that is exactly why a story like this attaches itself to a man like him. Because all across medieval Europe, the master builders of the great churches were regarded with a quiet unease. They were men who understood geometry and load and force, who could conjure enormous vaults of stone over open air without letting them fall. To ordinary people, who had no way to grasp how any of it worked, that skill was indistinguishable from magic. And so, again and again, in country after country, the legends reached for the same explanation. The builder who could do the impossible must have had forbidden knowledge. There must have been a devil in it somewhere. Extraordinary skill has always unsettled the people who cannot see how it is done. And the trick at the heart of this legend is itself pure skill, because it is real. Stand on the footprint today and look toward the altar, and something genuinely strange happens. The tall pillars of the nave line up, one behind another, and the great side windows really do disappear behind them. From that one square of floor, the architecture performs the illusion exactly as promised. The church seems to fill with light from no visible source. The problem is what you can also see, because if you look straight ahead past the vanished side windows, you'll see a large window at the far eastern end of the church. The pillars hide the windows along the sides, but they do not hide that one, which means that if the devil had entered right after the church was finished in the 15th century, he would not have seen a windowless church at all. He would have seen the light pouring in from the east. The trick, in Jörg's own lifetime, was incomplete. So how did the legend of the perfectly windowless church ever take hold? The answer is an altar. In 1622, Marchicat, more than a century after the church was consecrated, a monumental new high altar was installed at the eastern end, and it blocked the eastern window. Suddenly, from the footprint, the trick was perfect. The side windows vanished behind the pillars. The eastern window vanished behind the altar. For more than 200 years, someone standing on that spot saw a great church full of light, with not one window anywhere. And then, around 1860, the altar was removed. The eastern window reappeared, and the illusion broke. But by then, it no longer mattered. The footprint was there, the legend was there, which tells us something remarkable. The famous tale of the builder who tricked the devil almost certainly did not come from the 15th century at all. It came later, after 1622, when an altar that Jörg von Halsbach never saw finally completed the optical illusion he is supposed to have designed. No medieval record mentions any bargain with Satan. The whole story grew, quietly, around a view that only existed because of furniture installed long after the builder was dead. And the footprint itself is just as uncertain. No 15th century account records anyone carving it. One theory is that it was a joke, left by the craftsmen themselves to point out the strange trick of the sightline. Another is that it was simply an old mark that people, over time, decided to explain by attaching a devil to it. And the mark you see today may not even be the original. Investigators have reported that the current footprint is a reconstruction, which is no surprise because this church has been through a great deal. During the Second World War, the Frauenkirche was bombed. Its roof collapsed. Much of its interior was destroyed, then painstakingly rebuilt in the decades after. The floor beneath the organ is not some untouched slab of medieval stone. Like the rest of the church, it carries the fingerprints of everyone who has ever repaired it. So the real mystery of the Devil's Footstep is not whether Satan ever stood inside the Frauenkirche. He didn't. The real mystery is stranger and far more human. How a trick of pillars, a black mark in the floor, and an altar installed in 1622 slowly fused together, over centuries, into one of the most enduring legends in all of Germany. And there may be a deeper meaning hiding underneath it. An art historian of the Archdiocese once pointed out that the footprint sits at a threshold. The devil can come this far, to the doorway beneath the organ, and no further. He looks into the sacred space, and from where he stands, he sees only absence. No windows, no source for the light. He mistakes what he cannot see for what is not there, and so he believes he has won. But the light was always there. He simply could not see its source from where he was standing. One step forward, and the truth of the whole building opened up around him. That is the quiet lesson buried under the folklore. The devil loses not because he is weak, but because he is certain that the single view from his one square of stone is the whole of the truth. The builder wins because he understands the entire building, while the devil understands only his corner of it. 500 years later, the Frauenkirche still stands over Munich. Jörg von Halsbach still lies buried beneath the church he raised in 20 impossible years. The altar that once hid the eastern window is long gone. The footprint has been walked over, worn down, bombed and rebuilt. And still, every single day, people line up to place their foot inside a dark mark in the floor, look up and watch the windows disappear. There is no contract with the devil in the archives. His name is in none of the accounts. His footprint was almost certainly shaped by human hands. But the mark endures anyway because it holds something the documents never could, the memory of how it felt to stand inside that church. Look at something too vast and too perfect to believe that ordinary men had built it, and reach for the only explanation that felt big enough. So go and stand in the footprint, look toward the altar, watch the windows vanish behind the pillars, exactly as someone meant you to centuries ago. Then take one step forward and watch the light come flooding back. And if, as you leave, you feel the wind rise between those two brick towers, well, the people of Munich have known exactly what that is for a very long time.